So good morning and welcome to Kitty Talks. We share inspirational life stories that empower you to create yours. And today I have with me a very dear friend who has come into my life through magic and synchronicity. And I'm going to ask her to share that story with you because it's a good one. I have the beautiful Helen Rebello. She is a women's empowerment leader. That's what I want to call you, Helen, because I think it just fits you beautifully. She's also an author and a speaker, and she wrote a book called The Magical Unfolding, which if you haven't read, I would suggest you do, because I love your work, Helen, because obviously it's very similar to what I talk about. But welcome to Kitty Talks.
Oh, thank you so much. I am so excited to be sharing this space with you and to get to just talk to you about magic and miracles and life and purpose. And yeah, I'm really thrilled to be here. I'm so glad that we got to be friends.
Yeah,
it's a
absolutely.
wonderful thing.
Absolutely. And the guys who listen to this podcast know that I always talk about following your breadcrumbs and how it's really important to listen to those intuitive nudges. So on that note, Helen, can you sort of say how we are being here today?
I can indeed. So there's an incredible breadcrumb trail that led me to connect with a couple of friends of yours. So first of all, Derry Llewellyn Davis is a friend of yours, I know. He's my husband's mentor. He shared something a while back that led me to connect with Andrea Pennington, who then led me to connect with you. So I found out about you through her. And as it often happens, you think, oh, interest peaked. I love podcasts. So I knew you had a podcast, and I started listening to that. I think I pretty much devoured about maybe 4 or 5 episodes in one go. Looked you up, just thought, I love what you're doing and I have to connect with you. I got that gut sense of I have to connect with you, but I didn't really know why. I just knew I did. And so for only the second time probably in my life to date, I messaged you then and there, I think on Facebook, and I did that with Andrea as well. And that's not a thing I used to ever do, just to say, can we connect? Can we talk? And we ended up connecting on Zoom. I still didn't know why. You still didn't know why. And then, so what unfolded afterwards was that we stayed in touch. We knew we had a nice connection. And then when I released my book, I had a whole load of copies gifted to me by a benefactor. And I asked all my crowdfunders to nominate somewhere. And then one of my friends, actually my mum's friend, nominated my sister's house. And I saw the name, thought that's the place. And I looked up what they were about, thought that's definitely the place. And then I was having an interview. I was being interviewed by Michelle from Mindful magazine.
Oh yeah.
And she'd recently interviewed you. I think you were the last person she'd interviewed. And then I saw in your bio, chair of my sister's house. And I just thought, oh okay, that's why we had to connect. And then since then, we've been on a whole journey together, really, haven't we? That's my sister's house is only part of it.
Yeah, and your book launched and you went and did a talk at my sister's house, which was amazing. And we're going to get into sort of Helen's background and Helen's story in a minute. But and then our lives have combined and you're doing Do Your Dharma, which is really exciting. And just watching your mission and your life just blossom and, as we do watch that magical unfolding and do our Dharma, it just brings us so much joy. So no, it's a pleasure to have you on the show today. Can you tell my audience a little bit more about the work you're doing at the moment, and then we'll go back into your story and how you got here?
Yeah, delighted to. So at the moment, I am on the cusp of basically I've brought together all of my work over the last 15 years, all of my learnings, all of my training, all of my one-to-one work. I combined them together with my love for writing, and I birthed my book, The Magical Unfolding, into the world. And since then, what I've realized is that there is huge scope for making the things I share in the book more tangible and finding ways to disseminate that learning, which is, it's kind of along the same lines as the stuff you talk about. It's learning how to live from your heart and not your head, and learning how to flow more freely through life without pushing and hustling and shoulding all over yourself. That's in a nutshell. It's a very long process, but that's essentially what I'm sharing. Kind of learning how to tap into who you are, what you want, what you're here for, and then living in a way that really honors that as best you can in a modern day world. So at the moment I'm doing my own podcast project to
pop-up
talk about the
podcast, which is
moments that
fab.
take us from being stuck in the normal world. Yay, pop-up podcast. It's
a great
exciting
name. I like it.
Because I'm really fascinated by what takes us from. I love it. I don't know where that idea came from. It again just landed with me. But yeah, it's all about sharing stories about transitioning from being stuck in, what I call the Matrix myth world, where you've adhered to the paradigm of life, and then something will happen to make you question everything, and then it's how you take that forwards and move into what I call more magical living. So after the podcast, I will be opening up a group to explore together what it means to live more magically and meaningfully in a modern day world.
Beautiful.
And that's kind of where I am right now, on the cusp.
Absolutely. And I would say for anybody listening, I'm hoping that Helen's going to give us maybe a couple of coffees to give away to our listeners. But I would say that for anybody listening, this book is really great.
Definitely.
This book is really great if you aren't necessarily happy with the way that you're living your life. It's a really good barometer, and it's a really good read to help you go into that more flowing state. And I think, Helen, I called you a women's empowerment leader, and I think both of us, it's about women reclaiming their power, actually. And we've gone through this stage, haven't we, where we've gone into the masculine. We've gone from being 50s housewives, where we were totally in our feminine but disempowered, to where we are now, which is working, doing everything, and probably being more in our masculine energy. And I really see with the work you're doing and what I'm doing is it's like learning to get back in flow and honor our power and honor our intuition, and live this beautiful, magical unfolding, as you describe it.
Yeah, definitely. Because what I've seen over the last 15 years of doing one-to-one work is that we're kind of just stuck in this cycle of pushing and pushing and pushing, and we're not using our inherent core power. We're not using our energy. We are using all the wrong resources, and then subsequently we just burn out. And I think what I really tried to do in the book was approach that from a very compassionate, understanding, enabling perspective. I didn't want anyone to read it and feel like they'd failed or they'd done everything wrong, or they were just messing up if they were living life this way. It's more about inviting people on a journey of self-inquiry and acceptance and discovery, and just gently, simple step by simple step, exploring a different approach to living, because that's what I've done. And
and
ever since I stopped pushing, it's been amazing.
Well, talk to me about that journey, because obviously, for people listening, tell me a bit about your journey, your story, your transition. How did you get where you are today, doing what you're doing?
Yeah. So it's been a long old journey, as you all know, because you've read my book, and obviously we've talked quite a bit about my journey through life. But essentially, I think it would be lovely to share something with you that I don't really share out
Hmm.
loud very often. It's in my book, and it's the first time I shared it. But I left home at 18 years old, under a cloud. Had a really dysfunctional relationship with my parents, and I left home to go and live with a man who I thought was my answer to everything. And I lived in a squat with him, and I was I was a bit stubborn, just determined to do my thing. And actually, what ended up happening was that systematically over time, he revealed himself to be quite unstable, quite violent, aggressive, just very, very messed up. And systematically over the period of about 18 months, he just totally broke me down and stripped away my self-worth, my sense of power. Actually, going back to what you said before, it's interesting now that I am enabling people to tap into their own power, because he completely stripped me of that. And I'd got to the stage where you are literally looking over your shoulder all of the time. You're living in fear all of the time. I couldn't go out without him approving what I was wearing, and then I'd go out with the few friends I had, because they were all monitored as well. And sometimes he would be watching me, and I'd get home and I'd get in trouble because I was talking to the wrong person or wearing the wrong clothes, skirt too short or something like that. Not that I wore short skirts. And basically I hid everything that was going on. So I was like super skinny. We had no money, totally kind of malnourished, so really depleted in all senses, but not necessarily aware of that at the time. But as I shared in the book, there was still a part of me, despite the fact that I was surrounded by really dodgy people and in a pretty bad setup, very much disconnected from any support network or anybody with a sensible head. I still had this part of me that just rebelled and resisted and quietly found a way out, because it got to a point of no return when he essentially held a knife up to my throat and backed me up against the kitchen wall. I can feel it as I'm saying it. And,
God.
I thought, this is it. This is it. And I don't think I was consciously aware of an inner voice at the time, but there was definitely something within me that knew he'd crossed the line a little bit too much. But it's mad. It's like, I don't know what takes someone from being intelligent and aware to putting up with this stuff. Even now, I don't know why I did it. But hey, I managed to get away. And long story short, I went through a series of processes after that to try and find my place in the world, try and get a sure footing again, try and be self-sufficient, try and be dependent on myself. So I managed to get a nurse training place, and I hid the acceptance letter that the original one that said I had a residential place. I'd applied for that without telling him, and I photocopied it, having cut that bit out, showed him the acceptance letter without the place. And then on the day I was due to start, he didn't know that I was actually leaving. And I left with literally just my essentials in a suitcase, and got a taxi and went to live in a nurse's home, and started rebuilding my life. I mean, it was quite tumultuous after that, but
did he ever come after you? Or?
Yeah, he did. He found me, and I ended up having to get police involved, and get a restraining order, all of that stuff. But you know what? It was like years and years later that I told the truth to my family about any of this. I mean, there's so much more underneath it that that I just, I wouldn't want to depress everybody about. But essentially, I recognize now that I had incredible strength because there was so much going on. But even though it broke me mentally and physically for a little while, I just always had this bit. I go like this because it's like this bit at the back of my head that I just knew I'd come through. I knew I'd be okay. I knew that I had this strength that would carry me through.
And can I ask, because obviously, having gone through my own stuff, my own, chronic depression, nervous breakdown, et cetera, when I look at that back, I see how I got myself into that situation. Like, can you kind of clearly see how all of that why that happened, really?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I hesitate to talk about this. And I think now I am in a good place to talk about it because I've reestablished really good relationship with my family. But essentially, without wanting to share too much of my family's history, my parents both had a really good reason to be messed up individuals,
right,
from their own upbringing. And I didn't know that at the time, but what I see now is that I was essentially craving love. I was craving love and support, and although my parents very much did love me, their ability to show that and demonstrate it and connect with me where I was at just wasn't meeting what I needed in the way I needed it at the time. It's not their fault, and I don't hold any grudges about any of that. They did the best they could, but I was looking for something I wasn't getting, and but also it's about self-worth. I was looking outside myself for validation and worth. And honestly, I think that journey pretty much continued into my 30s, mid-30s.
Yeah, I can imagine. And then by the sounds of things, you went and did your nurse training, and then you kind of followed you rebuilt yourself, but then followed your breadcrumbs because you've trained in lots of different modalities, haven't you?
Yeah, I have. I'm a bit of an eternal student. So actually, I didn't complete my nurse training. I got halfway through. I did 18 months. I hurt my back, and at the time, they used to pension you out. I was really relieved because I actually hated it because I was always getting in trouble for talking to patients too much. Ironic. That was the bit I loved. It's like when I talk to them and they feel better. But no, you'd rather put me at a desk and have me push paperwork. So yeah, then I got a bit lost in the wilderness for a little while. I went through the wilderness years, and then I trained in radiography, following my head, thinking logically. So I have a radiography degree. It's like a BSc in medical imaging. And then I specialized in ultrasound. So I have a postgrad diploma in that. And then when I walked away from that, I did all the more Eastern medicine related stuff. So I trained for 3 years in shiatsu. I got fascinated by energy medicine and a more holistic approach to well-being. And then I've done lots of subspecialties around shiatsu, and I trained in craniosacral therapy. And I trained as a yoga teacher, but more for myself, if I'm honest. But then I ended up teaching. And I think over the years, what I recognize is that one of the core themes is I am endlessly fascinated by the human body, by the human condition, by our capacity to transcend things, and by that inner strength, by things that help us access inner power. And also, I'm really good at getting people from chaos to calm. And that's a thread that's kind of run through, even from radiography days. That was one of my core skills. I was super good at calming people down, in resus when everyone's panicking and shouting at each other. I'd come in there with my X-ray machine and I just calmed everything down. And I learned how to deal with angry people and scared people and shouty people, and realized later I'm an empath. So it's no wonder. It's like, so that's my breadcrumb trail, and I think I will study and learn for as long as there's breath in my body.
Yes, but it's important that we put it out in the world as well. Like that, you know, I'm learning that lesson myself because
Yes.
I'm like an eternal student. I think we always will be eternal students, but I think it's about now us sharing that what we've learned. And I know that that's totally what you're stepping into, because obviously your book is almost like the culmination of all that knowledge, isn't it? Coming together.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. You know, and I recognize that I went on a self-development journey, and I was working as a transformational therapist. Really, I've combined these different modalities in my own way. And because you learn about Chinese medicine diagnosis, I got really good at reading people. And so over the years, I kind of became a mentor stroke shiatsu therapist, stroke cranial therapist, just giving people tools to get out of this and back in their body. And I was really good at that in a one-to-one setting. But I got to a point where it was frustrating me that I couldn't reach more people and couldn't share these things with more people, because I knew it would have more impact. And then I also realized that working one-to-one, people won't always take the action they know is best for them. They kind of need a more collaborative, supportive environment with more accountability. And actually training in yoga as for my own practice, and then having my clients ask me to put classes together, that was another really crucial stepping stone and breadcrumb, because of course I said yes. And then that helped me really realize that I love a group environment, actually, even though I'm an introvert. And I love seeing people learning together. And I saw how they would support each other, and, they would link up. So if someone was maybe thinking they wouldn't come to the class, they would reach out to someone else, and the other person would talk them into it. So they'd come, and there was just this we just built such a gorgeous group. I was teaching with Gav, my other half, as well, which was awesome. So, yeah. So it's compulsion to share.
Yeah. I was going to say, what advice do you have for our listeners? Because obviously you have been following your beautiful breadcrumb trail for quite some time, and tuning in. What is it you love to do? What is it you love to do? Refining. And obviously that's culminated in the book, and now the Magical Life Circle membership circle that you're going to be running as of next month.
Yeah.
But what advice would you have for our listeners who are on that journey now? How can they tune in? What would you say?
I think for a lot of us who haven't got to that place yet, we are, in my experience over the years, what I've seen is that most people are trying to figure things out logically, as you know. So they are really, and that frustrates people, because they're like, but I need to work out the how. And this, you talk about this as well. So they're really like in their heads, really relying on their heads to sort stuff out. But what I've realized is it really doesn't work that way. So my advice for anyone who's in that place, because I've got to meet them where they're at, is just start by keeping it super, super simple, and find the thing that you naturally are drawn to when you want to access some sense of quiet or grounding, or something that takes you out of the busyness of your head. So for some people that might be walking their dog, or just walking. For some people it might be swimming. For some people it might be yoga. It might be reading, writing, knitting, whatever it is. If you can find a way to do more of that, it's taking you more into your body and less in your head. And if you give yourself increasingly small amounts of time spent doing this activity, knowing that it's actually helping you be more in your heart, then I think you start opening the gateway for your heart to start sending you messages in the form of instincts, or you might hear stuff, or you might feel drawn to something, or something serendipitous might happen. And it's just changing your relationship to what you're already doing. A lot of people know the thing. I used to say to people, what makes your heart smile? That's my favorite question that I used to ask, because people always know the answer, because they smile immediately. So if you ask that question, like, go and do more of that. Even if it's an extra 5 minutes, just do more of that, because that will help you
tune in.
In.
Yeah, I totally agree, because as human beings, we want to know how is that going to work? How will that happen? And it doesn't work like that at all. It's like, that's well, I always talk about Dharma. You can't see it, you feel it. You feel into it, and and it will unfold at its own pace. But you have to take the action and you have to move towards it. And I think your life is a really beautiful example of that, actually, because you've kind of come through your challenge, rebuilt yourself, tuned into who you are. And then obviously you've gone through your journey of following what it was you wanted to do next. And the culmination of that is obviously now what you're doing with your everything. It's perfect. Everything you've learned, studied is now going to be brought out in the world to help others. And our purpose is an unfolding adventure. It's not a flash of insight. So
definitely. And for me, I think the biggest shift of all, and I know that you'll relate to this, is that I had to go through all of these processes. Everything I share in the book that empowers others, I've had to go through that process myself as well, even though I've only recognized it retrospectively. Because I had to embody these learnings and really come home to myself. And in the process, what happened was I really started accessing my expression, my creativity, which I'd always known was there since I was a kid. I'd always wanted to write, and I've always been good at writing. But I had to go through that long-winded process to be able to now, in my late 40s, be able to actually speak out loud, and share things out loud. I would not have been able to do that even 2 or 3 years ago, because I hadn't integrated it enough in myself. So, for some of us, it might take years, and for others, it's really quick. And I think it's all fine.
Yeah, I think that's a really valid point, because we tend to be in this comparison world where, you're on your own path, you're on your own soul's evolution, wherever and whenever this stuff comes to you and it unfolds for you, it's the right time. I think that's a really good point to make to our listeners, because Instagram and everything that we are bombarded with, we're continually comparing ourselves to people. But as long as you can grasp that it's your job in this lifetime to evolve, to grow, to basically understand and experience yourself. Like, that may sound a bit weird, but like Helen's described, all the things that she loves, she's explored, and that is what it's about. And then that will culminate in some way or shape or form, which is obviously with what you're doing now with your wonderful book. It's amazing.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about the Turning Point project as well, because that will still be running when this podcast is aired. Is it going to stay up, or is it just going to pop up and pop back down again?
It's popping up for the whole month of April. And then what I will be doing is actually setting it up as a proper podcast, but I'll release probably bi-weekly, 2 episodes a week over 10 weeks. There's 20 episodes. So people can still get access to it after the event. They can still sign up at any time during the event, because I send out summaries, at different intervals and at the end with every link in it. But essentially, it's very much a heart-led, instinctive, it doesn't kind of make any sense in some ways, because I'd always known since writing the book, I knew I wanted to do a pop-up podcast kind of exploring issues around how you transition from one place in your life to another, because that's been the theme that's run through my work and my own life. And it's the sticking point in the middle where you
get scared and stuck.
And you talk yourself out of things, or you feel like you failed because you're stuck in the middle and you're really struggling, and people kind of lose faith in themselves and start beating themselves up. And so with the Turning Point project, what I wanted to do was bring together a community of people who are all dear to me, who all have a really special place in my heart, but I know have really gorgeous, authentic ways of sharing their own turning points that helps them shift in their lives. And some of those are huge, and some of those are small. Some of them aren't significant till after the event. It's just like kind of demystifying this whole concept of turning points and just exploring it and just sharing stories. And it's been so awesome. I love it.
So valid though, because you're so right. We have this kind of sort of fear of that turning point, because I suppose we're learning again, aren't we? Because something that we're good at, we've got to turn and pivot and do something different. And actually, if you can embrace that as growth and learning, and because I'm in that place at the moment, just sort of sitting in the kind of transitional period while I step into this work full time. And it is a funny place to be. I think we don't embrace it enough. It's just literally a period of time for reflection, maybe.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And in a way, I'm in that as well, because I only published the book I don't know, 6 months ago or something, and I had a period almost of grieving afterwards, because actually that was the realization of a dream I'd had since I was 8 years old, and I really didn't quite know what to do. It's like, even though I did have ideas, I still had to almost sit with the achievement and press pause and not run towards the next thing, even though I already had a plan, because I'd set it out when I did my crowdfunding. So I knew where I was heading, but I had to take time to just be for a bit, and recover my energy and just be okay with how things unfold, essentially.
Yeah, I think that's such a valid point we've hit on at the end of the podcast, actually, because if you're listening to this, essentially probably there's nothing wrong with your life. Do you know what I mean? You live in the Western world, you've got a lot to be grateful for, you've got a roof over your head, you're happy, you're healthy, yet we're always trying to be somewhere. I think it's my energy type is obviously the pitta, the fire. I want to be there, and I think that turning point place is if we can just sit and enjoy it and enjoy life and be, in our day-to-day experience and just be thankful and grateful for it, then, it's a different shift.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the turning point is still part of your life.
Yeah.
It's still, every single day is a gift, even if it's a day that brings you at its close to a place where you think you haven't really shifted or moved, or, well, what if that's okay? Because what if just in the sitting and the being, you access something you wouldn't have done if you were busy rushing and striving and pushing?
Yeah, and you had some time with your family, or you saw something that you didn't see before, or you connected. Really beautiful.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's probably one of the most fundamental messages we could both share, really, isn't it? It's like, while you're focusing on the there and the other side of the bridge, you're missing the richness of now. And there is always richness in something. In every moment, you could see a gift if you actually approach your moments that way. And realistically, yes, we're human, so we will go blindly asleep through a lot of our day. But if we have an awareness that at some point we can kind of look up, and look around us. I'm looking out at my gorgeous view that I manifested in front of me. You'll just see, oh, look at the sun around the cloud, or look at the bird in the trees, or whatever it might be. It sounds all very poetic, but that stuff is actually the underrated stuff of life. It's kind of the magic of life.
Magic of life. Helen, thank you so much. If you're listening to this podcast, share with us what you got. What have you taken away from this conversation? And please do tag me on Instagram or on Facebook and let me know that you've been listening. Tag Helen as well. And we'll have all of Helen's details in the show notes. If you want to connect with her afterwards, you're more than able to. And thank you, Helen. It will be great to sort of give a couple of listeners a book. So thank you I appreciate that offer.
Yeah, I'd love to do that.
Yeah, thank you so much. And yes, we will be back next week with another amazing guests on Kitty Talks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. This podcast was sponsored by my Do Your Dharma course. Create a life so good that you pinch yourself. This 8-week online course demystifies Dharma and shows you how to tune in to why you're really here. Go to www.kittytalks.com/do your Dharma.